economy is a major issue internationally and also in India, and not much is known on this topic. What is going to happen? A lot of debate whether precarious work is being generated or it is a better work, should be encouraged, about regulation, many things. So without taking any time, I invite Professor Jeemol Unni to deliver her presidential address.
Good morning again. I hope that this hall will fill in soon. I'm very pleased to be able to deliver the presidential address at the 63rd Labour Conference of the Indian Society of Labour Economics. And I've chosen a theme, platform and the shared economy, precarity of work or building agency. This is not it's not an empirical paper. I'm not churning the data, but it's a set of issues which I think we should be thinking about, and I'll try to present, and I hope that we will definitely have it as a theme in the next Labour Conference, but then I hope that we'll have a lot of future papers coming up in this area. So platforms and the shared economy, precarity of work or building agency. The emergence of platforms and the associated idea of the shared economy have fostered a lot of research questions in recent times, especially those relating to the implications of these developments for the labour market. One of the questions that is being asked is, are these developments enhancing the precarity of work as contracts become increasingly informal, or do they build agency as barriers to work participation decline with the advent of these platforms? A cursory reading of the literature would suggest that the jury is still out on this question. I will argue today that it is critical to understand the nuances of the ongoing processes to address this important question. And in order to do so in a systematic manner, it may be useful to recognize the heterogeneity among platforms, as precarity of work or agency may be a function of the nature of the platform and the type of work that it offers. Given this premise, my presentation will have the following sequence. I will first identify a variety of platforms that exist today and their interface with the shared economy. Moving on, I will discuss a tentative heuristic framework that can be used to understand precarity and agency in the context of the platform economy. And I will then use this framework with some empirical evidence, basically some qualitative data, to compare two types of platforms in the food sector and to understand the nuances of the process at work. And some key ideas will be summarized, which to my mind are useful to understand the processes of work. I'll conclude with some ideas for research. I will cut short some of this due to the lack of time, but you have the full script in your set of papers. So the variety of platforms that exist today and their interface with the shared economy, the platforms are essentially matchmakers that helps producers diversify their buyers and provide consumers with a variety of products. Value of the platform depends on the strength of network effects. That is, platforms do not own the means of production, but they own the means of communication. The platform economy has been growing and blurring the lines between the formal and the informal sector. So while the software industry, digital professionals, and the government to a great extent view this as a new business model that creates a win-win situation, but labor economists have been somewhat skeptical. This tension is reflected in the academic studies and in public policy. There has been a plethora of empirical work mapping and exploring work in the platform economy, including from the ILO. However, there has been little theoretical debate on this issue, resulting in studies commonly overgeneralizing and excessively extrapolating from limited empirical data as recorded by Joyce. Broadly based on their technical nature, there are two kinds of digital platforms. I won't go into great detail about this, I think, because we all know that. They are web-based platforms which give tasks to selected individuals or tasks given to crowds. The first being like the freelance market and the later being the Microsoft crowd work or AMT. and location-based platforms that involve workers carrying out tasks in specific locations. Location-based platforms can be large international platforms. The most common ones we know are Uber and Airbnb, or small local location-based platforms that operate in various sectors like the food sector, and I'll be speaking particularly about one which is called Kamai in the city of Ahmedabad. Local platforms also include businesses that use social media as marketplaces, as was pointed out by Sabina Diwan last year. Clearly, the ability to reach markets through online platforms allows underutilized labor to be more fully utilized, and these forms of engagement in the labor market allow workers, especially women, to set up a business while working from home, either through the platform aggregator or selling through their own social media platforms. It allows women to gain financial independence and agency. According to Schmitz, there are yet few academic studies about location-based local platforms, and these are mainly newspaper reports and interviews with platform providers and independent contractors. It is quite possible that this category of work will have to be further subdivided in the future. So there's this concept of the shared economy, which has a lot of confused things. So I have tried to understand what the shared economy platforms are and how are they different from other platforms. Much of the interest around the sharing economy in the recent years has been fostered by the emergence of digital platforms that enable digitally supported businesses and communities. The shared economy has been defined differently by a series of authors. Collaborative consumption by Acquire and Botsman and Rogers, with a set of principles that include critical mass, idling capacity, belief in the commons, and truth in strangers. Soundarajan defines the sharing economy as crowd-based capitalism. Franken and Shaw defined the shared economy as consumers granting each other temporary access to underutilized physical assets, which is idle capacity, possibly for money. The concept of the shared economy is still evolving, and it is difficult to provide a perfect definition of the phenomenon at such a juncture. The sharing economy is only one segment of the platform economy. Based on the definitions discussed, I think we can work with a simple definition of the shared economy that involves peer-to-peer, that is C2C sharing on a temporary basis of available physical assets, skills, time or money, that is idle capacity, to achieve their fuller utilization. This definition and views discussed so far clearly suggest that the shared economy is a subset of the platform economy, and transactions in this economy have three features or axes. These are C2C or peer-to-peer exchanges involving better utilization of idle capacity, and the access to these assets is temporary. In order to understand the nuances of the process of work in the shared or platform economy, it will be useful to distinguish the transactions along these axes. So I've tried a tentative heuristic framework to understand precarity and agency in the context of these location-based platforms. There are conflicting views on the platform economy, ranging from precaritizing worker to creating micro-entrepreneurs. On precarity, a large body of literature mourns the fact that the platform economy is creating precarious work. Umarani and Gobel from the ILO ponders the question: if the platforms managed by algorithms reduce freedoms and flexibility, reduce autonomy and control over work. When large platforms use monopolistic practices, precarity becomes an issue of bargaining power. In countries that have legislations that support workers, like the right to work, a national minimum wage, and defined hours of work to be counted legally as an employee of a company, the workers on digital platforms have some bargaining power against the platforms. And so we see how the Uber drivers have won cases against the company in the UK. We have the Uber versus LMK. There are many cases online. You can see them online. Companies also use work practices like modularization, that is breaking up the entire job into smaller tasks. As Smith 17 put it, jobs become projects, then gigs and tasks, and eventually micro-tasks. The units of time and payment are broken down into seconds and cents. The question is how established standards of labor law and social security can be sustained if what constitutes a job is cut into smaller and smaller tasks with uncertain pay. Large number of people compete for these tasks, and the micro-task platforms and parent companies exploit this competition. The worker has little or no bargaining power in such a situation. So why do economic agents choose to work on these digital platforms, or do they have a choice? We provide a heuristic framework to view local location-based platforms through two lenses, empowerment and precarity. From the lens of precarity, our question is, can local platforms, that is aggregators of micro-entrepreneurs, provide a decent livelihood, share wealth, extend beyond the urban elite to micro-entrepreneurs, and provide value, that is make it affordable to consumers? From the lens of empowerment, we can investigate the question of resources, agency, like decision making, and achievements or outcomes using Naila Kabir's framework of empowerment. I'll never even pretend that I can really use Naila Kabir's framework in this paper. Do these workers have autonomy? Kabir defined empowerment as a process by which those denied ability to make strategic life choices acquire such ability, and she considered three interrelated dimensions, like I just said: resources, agency, and achievements. Resources often get translated to access, which misses actually the pathways to which this translates to agency and achievements, de facto versus de jure. A bridging concept used often is control. Resources are distributed through institutions, in this case the platform, wherein certain actors have more privilege than others, or they have more control. Agency, a popular measure of agency is decision making, and the meaning, motivation, and purpose that individuals bring to their action, that is their sense of agency. Agency is in relation to empowerment, therefore implies not only actively exercising choice, but also doing this in a way that challenges power relations, as indicated by Kabir in 2005. Achievements is direct evidence of empowerment or outcomes. The term achievement refers to the extent to which this potential is realized or fails to be realized, that is to the outcomes of the people's efforts. In this context, these three interrelated dimensions of power, how do we see the empowerment of women and men in the shared economy? We can frame the questions regarding empowerment in local location-based platforms as follows. Resources, what resources do location-based platform workers have and can garner? Agency, do women in these platforms have autonomy and decision-making power? And achievements, what are the outcomes that these women have achieved through their enterprises? If we view the sequence of work participation as moving from no work, in labor economics we call it out of the labor force, to work and decent work, shared economy platforms can be seen to a step towards building agency. Women work participation is enhanced as she can overcome her main constraint of working from home, and there is a fuller utilization of her labor. This heuristic framework can be used to address a gap in the literature evaluating the value of the shared economy as defined above, and could be useful in building theory. So, comparing two types of platforms in the food sector to understand the nuances of the processes of work. Women's work participation is low and has been declining in India, and this is a contentious issue continuously discussed by labor economists. Of the many reasons that may explain this, one factor is the reluctance of women to work outside their homes. This may be due to social, cultural, or economic reasons, childcare being too expensive given their earnings. The local location-based platform economy may be one way in which women are able to break out of this constraint, as work can be performed from home. There's a lot of data these days in the labor economics, in the labor force surveys on the place of work, and we see how large a proportion of women actually work from home, those who report that they're working from home. It helps the gradual movement of women from being outside the labor force to participation in the workforce, or underemployed to fuller employment. That is in itself a gain for the economy as a whole. The use of the framework of precarity versus empowerment to analyze the micro case study of location-based platforms in the food industry in Ahmedabad city. In our case study of the food industry, we focus on two kinds of digital platforms. My emphasis is on the variations in platforms. while we try to discuss whether they are creating precarity or agency. Women engaged in home-cooked food services through an aggregator platform, and women using social media as marketplaces to sell home-cooked food. Our cases were women in the following forms of digitally enabled businesses or location-based local platforms for home-cooked food. Kamai is an application for home chefs, home-cooked food service aggregator, and cloud kitchens are individuals selling home-cooked food on digital platforms, either through their own Instagram or Facebook, or we'll see later they use other digital platforms. We consider both these cases as being part of the shared economy within the platform economy. Why? In the first case, Kamai is a food platform that acts as an aggregator of home chefs selling home-cooked food. Applying the three characteristics of the shared economy to this business model, we find that the customer purchases home-cooked food from the home chef, who is also a consumer. So that's a C2C, peer-to-peer, through an intermediary platform, which is Kamai. The customer has temporary access to the culinary skill, which is the idle capacity of the home chef in the form of this home-cooked food. Hence, we categorize this food platform as a shared economy platform. In the second case of the cloud kitchen, a market ecosystem mediated by platforms, this is a C2C business that is selling home-cooked food, providing temporary access to the culinary skills, which is the idle capacity of the entrepreneur. The main difference from the Kamai business model being that the cloud kitchen uses social media as marketplaces rather than a third-party aggregator platform as Kamai. So we conducted interviews, only a few, in these two forms of location-based local platforms for a preliminary comparative understanding of this form of work. These interviews were conducted by my students who were taking my course called the Urban Informal Economy, very much the idea coming from Vigo and Marty Chen's course originally. So I use evidence from 20 semi-structured interviews with home chefs on the Kamai location-based local platform and cloud kitchens operating through social media platforms. These interviews helped elicit the perceptions of service providers through the platforms, and we simultaneously provide comparisons of this food platform, Kamai, and the cloud kitchens. In a case study, students interviewed 10 home chefs operating Kamai platform and operating on Kamai platform, and 10 women entrepreneurs selling home-cooked food through social media. The semi-structured interviews sought to investigate 5 fields and compare the two models of operation, basically the socioeconomic background, why they opted for this business, the investment in their business, their views and plans for expansion, and their views on the rating systems. And finally, we asked if they faced entry barriers and perceptions and support of the family and neighbors while they undertook this business. On average, the Kamai chefs were older, 46 years, cloud kitchen entrepreneurs were younger. Kamai home chefs were less educated, the average education being higher secondary, though 3 of them were graduates. The cloud kitchen women were all graduates, and overall Kamai home chefs had a lower economic background and started this enterprise in order to earn extra income for the household. The women operating on cloud kitchen mainly started as a hobby and expanded later to become a business. So we analyzed the two business models in terms of empowerment. We take the idea of resources. In the shared economy model, the home chef on the Kamai platform and members in the cloud kitchen were using their culinary skills as their main resource for their business. This human capital was otherwise not marketed and mainly used for the benefit of their own family. It allows for the idle capacity or skill to be better utilized and for women to participate in the workforce. Both the cloud kitchen entrepreneurs and Kamai partners work from their homes, use their own kitchens. Kamai partners use their own gas, fridge facilities, and were mostly earlier cooking for their families. Cloud kitchen micro-entrepreneurs invested a minimum amount of money, since many of them were in the baking business, and they invested in marketing, building and boosting their own site, and in equipments. Almost all the cloud kitchen entrepreneurs said they reinvested their profits, whereas only a couple of the Kamai home chefs were able to do that. The home chef and cloud kitchen entrepreneurs had control over their resources. their home kitchens, and they were able to utilize their idle capacity of skills to enter the business of home-cooked food. They were also able to garner resources to expand their business, with cloud kitchens being more likely to do so. Clearly, harnessing the power of the shared economy has empowered these women. Taking the case of agency, Kamai was catering to informal workers who were at the lower end of the informal economy. This was a good income-generating option for these women workers, as the investment requirement was near zero to start out on the Kamai app. They were able to operate from their own kitchens in the time that they would like to devote to this work. They had the power to make their own decisions with regard to what to cook, when to be available on the platform, whether to expand their business. In other words, they had autonomy and flexibility in work participation. Kamai provided them visibility and customers based on the food requirement and location. Advertising was also done by Kamai so that the informal home chef did not have to incur the costs of propagating the business. The Kamai partners used riders hired by them by the platform to deliver their product. As most of these home chefs were engaged in market activity for the first time, the Kamai platform was helping them to build agency. Some of them who had a small business in the same line earlier were able to expand their business. Cloud kitchen entrepreneurs were a relatively higher income group than the home chefs. The cloud kitchens used their own Instagram or other social media handles to propagate their products. They used Swiggy or Zomato to deliver their product to the customers. The additional advantage they got from using these platforms was more visibility, as the logos of the cloud kitchen appeared on these apps as well. Both home chefs and cloud kitchen entrepreneurs were making their own decisions and actively exercising choice, moving from no work to expansion of business. The shared economy in home-cooked food was providing autonomy and helping them to build agency. On achievements, we view the capacity to plan for the future as an achievement and outcome of the business model. The Kamai platforms was a new venture, and the average experience of these women on these apps was about 7 months, while the average age of the cloud kitchens was 3.2 years, and that partly explains why cloud kitchens were more likely to expand and also consider other outlets for their products. Kamai home chefs were relatively new in the business, and they were in the process of learning on the job. Few Kamai partners reported a wish to expand and set up a retail store or expand to tiffin services. One Kamai partner had was doing the seasonal snacks business, and she hired a cook for frying the product. She was ambitious, and she already had wholesale customers sold to Grub Udyog, which is a cottage industry outlet, and retail customers. So this was a varied business model and more likely to be sustainable. Her ambition was to export her snacks and had started a brand called Shri. One of the main methods of improved markets was through the rating received from customers, which is often seen as a negative. The Kamai partners were restricted by the fact that they were rated only on the Kamai platform. Cloud kitchens were rated on the Swiggy and Zomato and other delivery platforms that they used as well, and they got Google ratings that widened their clientele throughout the city. Most of the women looked at this as positively. They took the suggestions received on these rating platforms and tried to improve their business model and their products and services. Rating can be viewed negatively, as it can lead to abuse and closure of business, as reported in the literature. The women we interviewed on Kamai platform and Cloud Kitchen, however, looked at this positively, and they thought it helped them to improve their business. Overall, using their culinary skills, either as a Kamai partner or as a Cloud Kitchen entrepreneur, these women were building agency through investing in resources, improved capacity for decision making, autonomy, and making plans for growing their business. Now, looking at this models from the view of precarity. Income and prices. Labor platforms have been viewed as creating precarity. On one method was the process of pricing. The average net income reported by Kamai platform was 11,000, and Cloud Kitchens reported 15,000. A couple of the Cloud Kitchens had revenues as high as net incomes as high as 60,000 to Alakh a month. The women on the cloud kitchen had a longer history of business, were economically better off, were able to invest more, were more ambitious, and they probably did better in terms of net revenue. However, both forms of business were delivering business entitlements above the minimum wage of the states. It's not necessarily the best comparison. As noted in the literature, pricing could be a way in which precarity of informal workers are created on a platform. On the Kamai app, the price of the food was set by the platform. The prices are set lower so that the customers get value for their money, but that creates low margins for the home chef. But it helped them, but the platform partners thought that it helped them to get orders and expand their markets over time. One criticism, of course, by the home chef was that the margins left for them was very thin. The prices charged by the cloud kitchens was much higher, and one major difference could be the product. The product of the Kamai was mainly essential foods. There was mostly lunches and of different varieties, the Gujarati style and different style. Whereas the cloud kitchen was selling premium products, like high-valued products like cakes and other baked dishes and so on. So Kamai therefore kept its prices low with more or less regular orders from the same customer, while the cloud kitchens were able to charge a premium with fewer orders and received much fewer orders. Kamai is a shared economy platform, and one of the objectives of this shared economy platform was to create value for customers. As observed by one of the student interviewers, Kamai platform was designed on the basis to serve home-cooked food to customers at a minimal price. The platform that invested significantly in the business in creating algorithms had to deduct their share of their expenses as well. Another measure of precarity is long and extended hours of work, as we all labor economists know. Both Kamai home chefs, most of Kamai home chefs worked for 4 hours a day. 3 said they worked 6, 7, and 8 hours a day. The cloud kitchen women were much more flexible in their timing based on the orders that they received, and because they were dealing with these premium products, and often spent only 2 or 3 hours a day. Overall, the Kamai home chefs and women cloud kitchen entrepreneurs were not in a precarious employment on this count and had flexibility in their working hours. Kamai partners got visibility as advertisements were undertaken on the professional platform, and they would deliver their products only locally through the local Kamai in their own area, and this restricted their markets. This could also be the cause of lack of expansion and increased competition. To that extent, the cloud kitchens were also restricted by the locality in which they served and competition from other cloud kitchens selling similar products. This was noted as one of the threats they faced. However, cloud kitchens also registered on Swiggy and Zomato apps, and so their visibility was greater and their reach became greater. The main business proposition of these digital platforms is altering the nature of trust, and this is true for the shared economy. Kamai platform guarantees the safety and hygiene of the home-cooked food of its partners, not just by imposing a rating system of assessment, but also by an assessment of skills and quality. The cloud kitchens built trust over time, at first by delivering to known customers, then growing their businesses through social media. To sum this framework proposed, while there may be elements of precarity arising from issues of pricing, overall the shared economy model of business in home-cooked food empowered the women and built agency. Kamai created a new avenue of work and business for women in the informal economy. It was started to provide low-cost home-cooked food, which was creating value for the customers. Kamai can also be viewed as a social enterprise that sought to provide an opportunity for business to women who were not earlier in the labor force, women who were constrained by the fact that they could not leave their homes for various reasons. The women entrepreneurship literature has found that one of the purposes of such enterprises was to create a social good and should not be viewed purely from the angle of profits and scale alone. And we've written a lot about this in our last book, Women Entrepreneurship in India. Kamai has invested in creating this business digital platform and was providing value to the producers and consumers in this business model. One of the advantages of the shared economy was that there were no entry barriers or low entry barriers. It democratized opportunity to enter the labor market, as starting out on the Kamai platform or even as a cloud kitchen was work from home using their own kitchen space, it did not require a large initial investment. Hence, entry barriers into the business were low. However, this also meant increase in competition from new businesses, which was one of the threats reported by the Kamai partners and the cloud kitchen entrepreneurs. Both Kamai platforms and cloud kitchens can be viewed as a mechanism to start building agency for these women who otherwise might not enter the labor market. When asked, most of the women on Kamai and cloud kitchens felt that home-cooked food delivered on platforms would be the future of the food industry. In the sequence of events in their work life, both business models had helped women move from a situation of no work or being outside the labor force to work using idle capacity of culinary skills. This itself was a major change and a step in building agency. To move to the next phase of achieving decent work, there may still be some structural barriers to overcome. The advantage of the economy was that it reduced underemployment, increased women's work participation in the workforce, and provided flexible working hours in the safety of their homes. So let me now summarize the key ideas from the literature and the empirical evidence to highlight some of the key elements and the processes of work with respect to labor in these shared economy platforms. The new form of work and the future of work appears to be in the digital platform space and in the shared economy. There are very stark views on this form of work, from precaritizing of workers to building agency as micro-entrepreneurs. In the former, platforms are seen as digital contract agency, outsourcing work where the product and design remain with the platform. In the latter view, platforms can be seen as an aggregator where the product and designs are with the micro-entrepreneur. The question of precarity versus building agency should distinguish between the shared economy and these micro-task platforms. The shared economy platforms provide more flexible, easier and simpler way to start up as a business and build agency. The large micro-task platforms act as digital contract agencies where chances of precarity are greater through monopolistic practices, as we described earlier, low bargaining power for the workers and modularization of tasks. So a micro-entrepreneur in the shared economy can start from the home or her current office and with only an internet and an idea. Since banks are generally reluctant to extend credit to new entrepreneurs, startups can access crowdfunding on platforms. The value of the shared economy for the producer lies in increased demand and expanding markets. Value of peer-to-peer sharing or exchange, where the consumer is the producer and vice versa, is utilization of idle capacity in both the physical and human capital. This can be a start of building agency, particularly for women who may not be able to work outside their homes. Soundararajan in 2016 discussed 4 key impacts of the shared economy that succinctly sum up the value proposition of this form of production and consumption. First is altering the capital impact. Recalling our definition of the shared economy as temporary access to underutilized physical and human capital, idle capacity through peer-to-peer sharing may increase the economic productivity of the asset. Total factor productivity increases when on average over time more output is produced from the same inputs, physical capital, financial capital or labor. Shared economy platforms thus increase the capital impact of these factors of production. The second factor he talks about is economies of scale and local network effects. One of the stated advantages of technology-enabled economic growth is creation of economies of scale. This can come from spreading fixed costs over large output or from specialization of labor in large factories. The digital platform using small entrepreneurs' idle assets or skills can appear as a loss of economies of scale. Some of the loss of the gains from scale will be countered as it is no longer necessary to make large investments in, say, buildings, hotels and restaurants in this case. Further, many economies of scale will be preserved and distributed by the platforms. Learning by doing might not occur in a hotel's organization, but through a network of producers who sell on the platform. In the case of location-based platforms, the demand-side economies of scale would not lead to one global winner, but to one or more winners in each local market. The Kamai shared economy platform demonstrates scale economies of IT investment, advertising and distribution. Besides, there may be economies of scale at the level of food production as the demand for home chef products go up through local network effects. The third positive is the increased variety increased consumption. Sharing economy creates new consumption experience of higher quality and quantity. From the point of view of consumers, value is generated by the shared economy in affordable prices and access to cheaper products. Further, value addition occurs in the operation of local locational platform as it increases the choice of the consumer and the variety of goods available at the doorstep. This increase in variety may also increase consumption and hence increase economic activity and eventually even traditional GDP. The fourth point that Soundararajan talks about is the democratization of opportunity, which I discussed earlier. So Piketty in 2014 in his book argued that inequality is on the increase because the returns to capital R is greater than the growth of the economy G, while the rate of growth of wages is the same as G. Piketty's solutions are traditional, that is, you increase in global taxes. But Soundararajan in 2016 argues that the shared economy is turning the tables by expanding the population that enjoys our rates of growth. New micro-entrepreneurs with access to digital technologies is democratizing opportunities for people once relegated to laboring for others, or for women not participating in the labor force earlier. These four economic impacts sum up the value proposition of the shared economy and how the positives can potentially outweigh the negatives in the form of exchange. Ideas for future research and policy options. The case study of food platforms is obviously a very, very small case study, and the functioning of the shared economy suggests that such platforms can potentially enhance work participation by making it more flexible and also generate autonomy. However, more empirical work is required to settle the question with respect to the trade-offs between precarity and agency. Gissinger in 2020 suggested two issues that need to be studied in the shared economy, which is talked about quite a lot: transformation of work and social equity. Do the positives outweigh the negatives? A gap in the empirical work, and the question to ask is, to what extent do stakeholder groups perceive social equity and justice in the digital and shared economy platforms? Location-based local platforms are less researched. This category may have to be further subdivided to include micro-entrepreneurs acting as aggregators of informal workers, or social media, or using social media as marketplaces. Such forms of micro-entrepreneurship are growing fast. Academic studies on these local shared economy business models are an area for future research. The shared economy is creating wealth, but it raises the following questions that require empirical study and verification. What platform characteristics can tilt the balance in favor of increasing agency vis-a-vis precarity of work? What kind of platforms, control or coordination is optimal for enhancing agency and providing work at the same time? This is when you talk about governments interfering. Do shared economy micro-entrepreneurs provide value to consumers? How would local platforms in the shared economy impact the larger digital platforms? It's a major area of work we know little about. How are the local platform models transforming work, and is it leading to a more equitable society? All these require micro-qualitative studies and large-scale surveys of global platforms and local location-based platforms. It also requires new tools of theory to be able to understand the phenomenon that is unfolding before us. Questions for policy. As we are discussing, there are differing views on the transformation of work through the shared economy. It creates employment where income opportunities are low and poverty is high. Does the shared economy help in transformation of work and social equity? Women in the shared economy may transform work by increasing capacity and experimenting with limited resources, but does that bring them social equity? On this principle of social equity and justice, a new business model of cooperative enterprises in the shared economy, where profits are shared among every worker, is starting to grow. A Ministry of Cooperation was formed in India in 2021. what policy options are required to encourage, facilitate, and ease the creation of a cooperative model in the shared economy? Under the Indian Labour Law, the new labour codes identifies workers as employed, engaged, or have work arrangements. Law identifies those employed broadly as wage salaried who have unemployment relations, those engaged in the informal economy as self-employed, and those with work arrangements such as on the platform as gig workers. The new Labour Code on Social Security 2020 allows platform gig workers to obtain Social Security without having the status of an employee. The code uses the term work arrangements to distinguish platform workers from employees which are self-employed, employed and self-employed independent contractors engaged in the informal sector. In this categorization, under the new codes, where does the shared economy platform partners fit? Can they get Social Security as gig workers under the new Labour Code on Social Security 2020? Does the state's role differ in the case of shared economy and microtask platforms? I'll leave this thing about the Motor Vehicle Acts. Unfortunately, the Social Security Code and the guidelines for the Motor Vehicle Aggregator 2020, that's another way in which the digital platform has been defined in the law, which regulates the conditions of platform, still await enforcement. Broadly, how should legislation improve the rights of platforms and shared economy workers? So to conclude, exploring the question on whether or not platform work produces precarity or greater agency, we are able to get an important insight about the heterogeneity in the platform economy. Our two cases reveal that we need to go deeper into the specific context, scale, agents, and outcomes involved in different models in the platform economy to answer the question of precarity or agency. We argue for a distinction between the shared economy and microtask platforms, wherein precarity and agency are more in oppositional relations in the latter, that is a microtask platforms, rather than in the former. The shared economy versus the platform economy, where the producer-consumer shares idle capacity on a temporary basis and invests in business, that is the shared economy, is more likely to be building agency. On a positive note, Soundarajan observes, as the lines between the producer and the consumers blur, it seems clear that great potential exists to expand the fraction of the population that owns wealth-producing assets. Much more work is needed for a more nuanced understanding of platform work and the shared economy encompassing it, and that is my plea. Thank you.
Friends, you will agree with me that it was a very profound address, presidential address in this conference. First of all, for the first time in any presidential address, of course this topic is new, this unresearched topic has been addressed. And Professor Jeemol Unni very clearly pointed out that very difficult to say whether platform work will produce precarious work or build agency. It depends upon the nature of work, scale, operation, and all that. But above all, as I said, it is a very unresearched area and evolving. More research needs to be done, she herself pointed out. I just wanted to share with you that as a tradition of the Indian Society of Labour Economics, presidential address topic, theme, becomes one of the themes of the next conference. So platform work, as decided by the executive committee yesterday, will be one of the next conference themes of the conference. And I hope that more insights from the society, from the paper writers, from researchers will come. With these words, we have finished in time this session, but we have not compensated the loss of 1 hour. So without any break, please just sit on your seat. The session will continue. Keynote paper presentation, very important for the conference. So Priyanka, please come. So thank you very much.